dim the lights, raise the curtain, and start the previews. Welcome to the theater. Aaron, welcome back to the theater. I cannot express how happy I am to have you back on.
I'm super excited. There are very few people that I would get out of bed at 2:00 in the afternoon for.
Oh man. Well, I'm happy to hear that I'm one of those people. And this is like the new, I guess, evolved step of the podcast that we're doing it via video as well. I mean, the podcast version that goes out is going to be just audio.
Mhm.
But I think I said to my guest last week, this is really just for my enjoyment that I get to have video, because it's so much easier to have conversations when I can see my guest's face.
Yeah.
And it's so much better. And for you actually have an incredible backdrop that you have set up in your office. So that's cool too. That's real, right? That's not a Zoom background.
No, that's real. Unfortunately, Amazon has become my best friend during these times, not in a lot of ways, but I also wanted to be able to create a space. I don't know how long we're going to be doing virtual telehealth sessions with people,
Mhm.
but I wanted to create a sense of space for
Yeah.
myself and the people I see,
Yeah,
because
wait,
there's a lot.
I got one. Is this gonna
Yeah,
show up? Let's see. Check that out. Oh,
the
the
office.
mic is like doing a weird, yeah. It looks like I have a big chunk of me missing. I got The Office. I got let's see. That's the conference room at Parks and Rec. That's Leslie Knope's office.
Oh, good old Leslie Knope.
And then I got Stevie's desk in Schitt's Creek.
Very nice.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I even sometimes will use the sound machine outside of my door because it really creates a space for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to encourage the clients that I meet with too to create a space for themselves, because I know a lot of us are just kind of flipping on the computer on our couch, meeting with our counselors, and then flipping it off and going back to TV. But before that, there was the drive-in,
Mm-hmm.
where you were already thinking about what's going on, what you're feeling, what you want to talk about, what you don't want to talk about, or if you're hungry, what you want to eat. And then you had the physical space of the office that was somewhere you went to, and it had a feel to it. It had a feel for me too. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I got in the zone, and then you would leave and have that space to drive home, where the processing would continue, where you really had a chance to reflect on things.
You have the ability to transition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's not as apparent anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been doing what I can to create a space for myself, and then also encouraging my clients to create space, whether it be physically, like meet me in the same place every time, maybe in a place you go to all the time, or if you need 10 minutes to decompress, go step out in the back porch, or I don't know, something just to create that time gap that we used to
Yeah.
have.
And that's also a form of self-care. I mean,
Yeah.
just kind of like taking stock of what is it that I need? What is it helps me be fully present or helps me be more me? Um, and how do I offer that to myself?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think adjusting to doing video sessions has been, well, I mean, it's been an adjustment both for clients and for counselors,
Oh
you
yeah.
know. And we're all still, I think that Brene Brown, calls it an FFT, an effing first time, mainly because humanity has never gone through anything like this before. And so for me, it's been helpful to keep that in mind, because it's helped me be more gracious both to myself and to others. Like, we're all on our first pass at this.
Hmm.
None of us know how this goes. And even if some of us did, like our like Hail Mary on anything in life, our last kind of attempt at something has always been, if you can't figure it out, to like call up your mom and dad. Hey, what did you do whenever you encountered this? Or to like Google it or find another person who's been there before. But nobody has
Mm.
ever been here before.
No, not like this. Well, nobody alive, I would say, quite like this. It's very new. And that's kind of what I tell people all the time. Is they're like, what do I do? And I'm like, we're all figuring this out together.
Yeah.
There's no right, there's no wrong. If we're tripping and falling, at least we're trying.
Yeah. Yeah. I think to have compassion and to have grace, I think it's a little bit easier to have it with other people
Yeah,
than it is with yourself. But to offer it to yourself as well during this time is such an important thing.
absolutely. And I think we can almost use this time to create that space for ourselves. And so when this changes or blows up, well, I'm not going to blow over, but I think when things change in a positive direction, we will already have that practice under our belt of what
Mm.
that looks like to treat ourselves nicely when things get tough.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of learning time in all of this. It's also very stressful. So I've seen a lot of those, if you haven't learned a new thing or done this or done that during a pandemic, then what are you doing with your time? And I'm like, a lot of us are very stressed.
Get out of here with that. Like
I hate
nobody needs that kind of shaming attitude coming at him during this.
if you're able to pick up new skills and do that, great. However, there's a lot of people that it's kind of like what Brene Brown says. Some of us are over functioners during times of anxiety and some of us are under functioners. So that's going to look different. And neither one is more right than the other.
Yeah. I just try to take it day by day. And I think, before we started recording, I mentioned there was a time during the pandemic where I felt like I was kind of reaching burnout. And like my way to address that was not to find a different way to do therapy, but it was to pay attention to myself. And it was
Yeah.
to A, name what feelings I was having, B, try to discover the needs that were in those feelings, and then C, offer those needs to myself. And so, I tried to become more intentional with myself, and I found that to be very helpful. And I'm still, my work right now is just maintaining that,
Yeah.
because what I don't want to do is to go into autopilot. I'm feeling okay today. I'll just stop doing all of the things that helped me feel this way because I
Yeah,
got it. And then you end up right back where you were.
exactly. It's, what do they say? Self-care is an everyday practice, something like that. You
Mm-hmm.
can't just during this time. Speaking of like self-care and practice, I think this is a great metaphor for it. I used to be fairly good at skating. Between roller skates or rollerblading, I had a lot of fun, and so I bought myself a pair of skates during this time because I guess following the trends, and went out to the street and immediately fell on my face. I had no idea how to do it. It's so much harder than I remember,
Oh my gosh.
and that to me is like self-care. It's, you've got to do it every day or it gets harder and harder and harder to get
Yeah.
yourself back to it. I need to get back on my skates, but now
Are they rollerblades or are they like the regular skates?
they're rollerblades.
Yeah.
I always found them to be a little easier, and now I'm learning that, I'm almost 30, was really good at this when I was like, 10? And there's a lot of balance that goes into those things, and I have got to re-find my balance, which is another metaphor for self-care.
That's so funny because like a couple of months ago, we had gone somewhere, I can't remember, but I picked up a hula hoop for the first time in forever. And hula hooping as a kid was something that I never understood how some people couldn't do. My body can't hula hoop anymore. I can't, and I don't know what that, it's probably because I got a little bit more body around the middle than I did when I was 10, but I can't make that happen anymore. I mean, to what you were saying, there's a saying in recovery that I'm reminded of, and that's yesterday's recovery is about as good as yesterday's shower. It's just, you have to do your practices. You have to work your program every single day in order
Yeah,
to make sure that it continues to work.
yeah,
And I think
absolutely.
self-care is a lot like that. I think there's levels of self-care. Like there's self-care that you have to do every day. And then
Mhm.
there are elements of self-care that's like break glass in case of emergency self-care.
Oh yeah,
But you
absolutely.
don't want to have to do that every day.
No, because then it takes away from the fun things. So when you say break glass in case of emergency, I'm thinking getaways or
Mm-hmm.
whatever that big thing might be for you. And if you're constantly having to use that one, it kind of takes away from the fun and the magic of it. And also, there's a little bit of stress that goes into the breaking the glass in case of emergency because there's a lot there.
Yeah.
There's a commitment to it. So whereas those things are really great and they exist for a reason, the little things I think are what keep us above water every day.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then those great ones really just let us float for a little while.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm wondering, last time that we talked, we talked about your why therapy. So if folks want to listen to that, they can go back in the archives and hear that part of your story. What I wanted to ask you about this time was if you could tell me about what concept did you have? What did it look like of therapists or therapy before you became involved in it as either a client or as somebody who has been trained?
So the bulk of my understanding of it came from school counselors. And it's actually the direction that I wanted to go in originally. And then I had a school counselor tell me especially high school counselors, there's not enough time to really get to connect with people. It's a lot of college prep or taking those paths. And they said there's a lot of different hats we wear. And unfortunately, a lot of times we don't get a chance to really sit with people and counsel with them. So as soon as I got off the phone with that person, I was like, no, I that's not what I'm looking for. But that's where a lot of my understanding. So I actually had some really great ones, I think, elementary and middle school especially. And what I remember the most, and this is so funny because it's what I've been told even about studies shown, what do you remember about therapy, is just that space that I was given and the time to talk through things that were really, really upsetting me in a place that it was okay to talk about those things. And it never left the room. So nobody really knew that I was going to see the school counselor. Not that I was like ashamed of it, but when you're in middle school, kids prod and they want to know all the details. And if you tell them no, then it becomes even more prodding. But that wasn't a big deal. And they were always there for me. When I needed the school counselor, they were there for me. And I really think there's like 3 that come to mind that they just really helped me through those really tough times. So my understanding of it was that, like giving somebody a space to just be. On the flip side too, I also had this understanding, because I was thinking that it was different between kids and adults, that a lot of what we do is advice giving or telling people what to do. And thank God that was shot down immediately as soon as I got to school, because that's a huge responsibility. And I don't have the answers to everything that I hear. So that's helped out a lot. And so part of that, I think, is true. We definitely do create a space where you get to come in and just be. And it doesn't matter what that looks like. If you're coming in and you just want to cry, because that's what you've been holding on to for however long, that's okay with me. It doesn't bother me. I'm not uncomfortable. If you want to come in and tell me something funny that happened in your life, please do. I want to share in the happy moments with you too. So it's everything. Come as you are, and you don't have to prepare yourself before you come in.
Did you feel like that was something that you knew to be true when you were in middle and high school going to your school counselors?
I think so, because I think I was a very open child with my feelings. So, and a lot of teachers maybe didn't know how to maneuver that. I would tell you when I was very upset or when I was mad, or I had the language for those things when I was very young, or I would just show it. If I was sad, I was crying in the classroom. And a lot of teachers they didn't know how to deal with that. So then I would go to the counselor, and I never felt bad about it there. Whereas I occasionally would in the classroom. So I had that space in the school to go to where I didn't feel that shame, I guess, that comes with it.
Yeah. But I don't even know I guess that is shame, but I feel like it's to feel shame in a place that is not safe for you, either by design or by accident, like in the classroom about crying. I feel like that needs another word, right? Because it's like, well, that should be a safe place, but it's not,
Yeah, it does need its own word. However, I've learned too that if we're using the word should, we're probably looking at a place of shame.
Yeah, starts with the same 2 letters.
Yeah, should and shame. And also, I think it was Dr. Stride who said something about should that has always stuck with me. And I like to tell my clients it too, because we say it so often, is we've got to stop shoulding ourselves.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And of course that one sticks with you for obvious reasons. And so every time
I say to mine, you're shitting all over yourself. What are you doing? Yeah.
it gets your attention. It gets my attention because I just said it out loud too. But you're right, because I don't know, there's part of me, maybe that could be a little bit of that should shame talking when we're like, there needs to be another word for feeling unsafe crying in the classroom because there's such a culture of crying as weakness.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, something to ponder.
But I think it highlights, and I remember the last time that I had you on, we talked about this too. It highlights the relationship that your counselors established with you, and how you felt safe and you felt comfortable enough to be who you were in that moment with them, and you didn't have to hide anything. You could just let it out. I'm wondering, like, I know that you mentioned creating a space for your clients, inviting them to be. So how has your concept of therapy changed since, like, before you got trained or even went, to now? Like, your understanding of it now as a therapist, how's it different?
Well, it's interesting because I think back on what it looked like, or what I perceived it to look like as a kid, and it was a lot of just me talking and somebody kind of nodding and agreeing with me. And there's some of that, I think, still, but my concept has changed in the active listening, active responding, and therapy in a lot of ways is us holding up a mirror or being a mirror, because a lot of what we as clients do is we we have all of our answers, we just don't know that we have them. And so I think by holding up that mirror, it's almost like, oh, I'm watching myself do what I'm saying I don't know how to do. So there's that happens too. But then there's also some really amazing interventions too that we learn along the way that are so science and body based, such as EMDR or brain spotting, that help us integrate what we're thinking into what we're feeling physically too. I'm losing myself in my answer, but there's just so many different facets of it. We as therapists exist to create that space or help hold that space for you to be authentically you. And we're not just asking random questions.
Yeah.
They're thoughtfully put together. There's a reason behind them.
Well, and I think I heard you say too, it sounds like you had a thought that as a client, therapy was going to be much more directive. Like, you would come in, hey, here's my problems. And then the therapist would go, cool, here's what you do to fix them.
Yeah.
Has that been your experience being on the other side of the room as a therapist?
I find that that perception is still there, not with me, but like with clients, as they come in, they're like, I have this issue, what do I do? And I don't know where I heard it along the way, but if we give advice, there's this idea that you don't have the answer, so I'm going to give it. And I don't believe that. I believe that it's just hidden, or it's yours to figure out, your decision, your answer to find. And I'm really excited for you to find that, because then when we are able to do things for ourselves and to figure it out, it like is so much more meaningful, I think, than.
And then you own it.
Exactly. Like, if I go to a counselor and I say, I've been really feeling depressed for the past week, what do I do? And they give me a thing and I go try it and it doesn't work, then I'm like, what do I do? However, if I explore that, try to figure out the whys and the hows, and then I get there on my own, I think it speaks a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah. The way that I conceptualized it, because that's something that I've thought a lot about, and I think at the beginning really struggled with, is looking back to my own time as a client in therapy and being able to articulate the change that happened in me, and looking backwards to go, okay, well, how did that change take place? It was in the wrestling with all of the things. And so the way that I've conceptualized it is, if I just tell a client what to do, and of course there are times where being more directive is called for, but if I just tell them all of the answers, I am robbing them of their change.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had a client just today say to me, like, well, I'm paying you to tell me this kind of stuff. And I said, no, you're paying me to guide you through the process, not to do the work. If you hire a personal trainer, you're not paying them to exercise for you. You're paying them to teach you how to do the exercises, but you still got to do the push-ups.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like to use the comparison to physical therapy.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason they're both called therapies. In a lot of ways too, like the physical therapist will guide you through the movements, through everything that you've got to do, but they can't do it for you
Mm-hmm.
because they physically can't.
Yeah.
And I can't physically make these changes for you either. And the other part too is if you're like, a lot of therapy continues after you leave the office or the
Mm-hmm.
virtual office, it continues. And with physical therapy, if you only engage in these exercises when you're with your physical therapist, it's going to take a lot longer. Um,
Yeah. There's work that happens in between.
yeah.
Yeah. I've said to clients before, like, you and I are together 1 hour a week. If this is
Mhm.
the only time that you think about this stuff, that you do anything with it, that's not enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know, I'm thinking back to like, it's almost hard to conceptualize to me what therapy looks like because sometimes I think it changes based on the needs of who's sitting in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I also think that I'm trying still to define that, what it looks like with me. And like therapy with me, what does that look like? And the basis of that really is I want you to be comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to have a space where you can cry, laugh, or both at the same time if you need to just come in and to say, this is the place that I feel safest every week. And
Mm-hmm.
that to me is a win. Um, Interventions are important, but those to me are so crucial. And if we don't have those things, we can't move on to intervention. So that's where I spend a lot of my time too. And so I'm like in my mind trying to define what does therapy with Aaron look like? And it's an evolving process.
Well, I mean, I think for you to say that it may be different depending upon who the client is in front of you just sounds like that it's client focused and that you're recognizing because every person that you encounter, whether it's in your professional role or you as just the person, Aaron, every person you encounter is different. And just like in personal relationships, you know, your relationship with all of your friends looks different. You may relate to them the same way because you're the same, but each relationship may be different. It's going to be the same with clients. Like, even if you have a modality or a worldview that you stick with, you know, you're not going to interact with every client in the complete same cookie cutter way
Mm-mm.
because they're a different person and they have different needs. And I think for you to kind of say, you know, put it out there that you are a person, a therapist who looks for what the client needs and then tries to offer that to them on an individual basis. That sounds like the kind of therapist I'd like to see.
I tried the whole I am one way
Mm-hmm.
and this is how we're doing therapy, and it didn't work for me.
Yeah.
And I was seeing a lot of resistance, and I just don't think it was comfortable for people because it wasn't comfortable for me.
I
So
think
I
that shows. Yeah, yeah. It took
it
me a
was,
long time to learn that, but I think it shows. And I think from what you said earlier, like setting things up in your home to where it makes you comfortable, like in your sessions, that's spot on too, because you are like 50% of the therapeutic relationship. And so if you're, you know, feeling outside of your skin, it affects the relationship.
mhm. And I think we all have days too where we feel that anyway. And I have seen when I'm feeling that, I've seen how it can affect the way that I think, the way that I feel, the way that sessions go. So it's all these things to be aware of too.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about a movie.
Do
What
it.
movie did you bring for us to talk about today?
So we're talking about the Netflix original movie, Sierra Burgess is a Loser.
Yes. Um, so before you picked this one, I think I had seen, like, I remember it coming out and maybe remember seeing the trailer when it came out, but I never saw it. Like, I never went after it. So when you picked it, I brought the trailer back up and watched it. And I want to say Leanne was in the kitchen cooking or something. Um, but once the trailer got done, I walked in the kitchen. I was like, this movie is gonna murder us just by the trailer. And I don't think it murdered us as much as I thought it would, but it did slightly murder us.
When you say murder us, what are you meaning?
I mean, I thought that I was going to be a supersized puddle of tears on the ground at the end.
Gotcha.
And I think that I was just a Happy Meal size puddle of tears on the ground at the end.
Yeah, I can totally understand that.
I think especially the scene in the trailer where she yells out, "Do you know how tough it is to be a teenage girl who looks like this?"
Yeah, that part broke my heart.
Yeah. So what was it about this movie that made you want to pick it?
So I'd actually watched it when it did come out. In a lot of ways, I heard the soundtrack first, and then I wanted to watch the movie. But there's so many themes in there that, while they're central to a lot of teen rom-coms, they're also central to just life. And the biggest theme that stands out to me is being authentically yourself in a world that would love it so much if you weren't. Mm-hmm. Because there's a quote that says, like, loving yourself is actually an act of defiance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on, like, what Brene Brown says, like, we have an entire industry dedicated to hoping that we're not loving ourselves, and that's the cosmetic industry. Because they want to make us beautiful. They want to make us feel good. And worthy is the big thing there. And that is kind of the central theme, I find, to this movie, is a girl who has every bit of the best qualities, but she doesn't see that in herself. And so there's this game of trying to be somebody that she's not for a while. That's actually most of the movie, is pretending to seriously not be herself. And that in itself, I think, is something that has been popping up a lot in my sessions. This idea of, I have to be somebody else to make somebody else happy. Mm-hmm. And that stood out to me in a really big way.
You know, what's interesting is I'm thinking back to the last episode that we did together, Love, Simon, and I feel like there's some common themes between these movies.
It's a theme that I wrestled with in my personal life, and one that I just keep hearing that comes up. And the big one that has been standing out to me is this idea that we're too much for people. Mm-hmm. And not ironically, but if we're Alanis Morissette, ironically, a song came out, I think it was last year. Carly Rae Jepsen had a song called Too Much. And it really resonated with me, because we're kind of...
Wait, like Call Me Maybe, Carly Rae Jepsen?
Oh, she exists on a very real...
Pop music Aaron, everybody. Here we go.
I love her. I've seen her 3 times in concert. She's so much fun. It's just happy, lighthearted pop music, but sometimes she throws a twist into there, and she's just so catchy. But that song is, am I too much for you? Am I too much for you? And this, like, the video is kind of her just being, like, all these people that look like her just filling a room, and, like, what that means to her. And then eventually, at the very end of the video, they're, like, having fun with each other. They're all still filling the same space, but in a different way. Yeah. Where she's happy and comfortable with it. And so these themes stand out to me in a lot of ways. It comes up a lot in therapy. It comes up a lot in my own life.
Do you think that so I'm wondering how much, like, I don't have a better word for it, so I'll call it confirmation bias this is. Like, do you think because you've done some personal work around this, that it pops up a lot because you are especially attuned to picking up on that message? Or do you feel like this is just something that's kind of going around right now and people are coming awake to?
I think the answer is yes. I do think that I am especially attuned to it because it is something that I've worked on, am working on, will always be working on, and it's something that pops up in a lot of people's lives. But then I also think it's a big deal. I've been seeing a lot of pop stars taking down the idea that a pop star has to look a certain way or act a certain way, and they just want to be normal. And that to me at first I was like, no, why do you have to do that? Isn't that part of the fun of being a pop star? But then I realized we put so much pressure on people, and we're doing it to ourselves too, to be a certain way. And if it's not authentic to ourselves, it's just going to eat away at us.
I would imagine that that's very similar to, like, a concept of what a therapist is before you become one, and then what you encounter when you become one. It's that kind of relationship between the person observing the thing and then the person becoming the thing. Like, you know, and so I would imagine, you know, if you and I embarked on our pop music career today, you know, we may be trying to put on, you know, a persona because that's what we believe it should be. And then when you get there, it may be feeling like the persona owns you. And then the struggle becomes getting back to who you
Yeah.
really are. Yeah.
And I think right there is kind of why I was having a hard time putting it into just a couple of sentences what therapy looks like with me, what I view therapy as, because I have actually been trying to get out of a box that I was kind of put into
Mm-hmm.
during grad school. Um, the professor did not intend it, but I heard it as therapists look this way.
Mm-hmm.
And now and I think that's another thing is I've heard it before, you know, I'm still me in and outside of sessions. And people have looked at me before and go, aren't you a therapist? And I'm like, well, help me understand what a therapist looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the coolest part about what we do is we don't have a face. There's,
Yeah.
we personally do. Therapists, therapy is so different. If there
There's
are
not a cookie cutter. Yeah.
not all, if there's 10 therapists in a room, then there's 10 different kinds of therapies going on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why that relationship is so important and why we build on that. And I'm in the process of trying to, I think I know what it is, but trying to put it into words of
Mm-hmm.
what it looks like is a whole other story.
Yeah. I
But
think we
yeah,
do have like and I endorse this. We have some regulations that are put upon us. Really, those regulations are to protect the client.
oh, absolutely.
Um,
Yeah,
but we don't have regulations as far as like who we are and how we, well, some about how we treat. But I love that. And it's something I've talked about a lot on the show before because I came into grad school thinking, you know, tweed jacket, leather patches, high back leather chair, bubble
yeah.
pipe, that kind of thing. Um, but then
Still
I saw,
love that.
yeah, but then I saw that Virginia Satir video in Lifespan,
Yeah,
and I was like, oh, she's not like that. Maybe there's room for my personality and who I am in this. And so I kind of look and something that you said earlier, I'm taken back to. Um, I'm not the same therapist I am today as I was the day I opened the doors to my practice,
hmm
and I won't be the same, you know, a year from now. And part of that evolution is why I like the job so much, is because as I grow as a person, and you know, it is called practicing for a reason.
yeah, yeah.
Like as I continue to practice, that's going to keep evolving. Let me ask you this though, going back to the movie. So you said that she, gosh, how did you phrase it? Basically, like the world didn't want her to be who she was, or something along those lines.
hmm
It seemed to me in the beginning that she was very comfortable in who she was. And that it wasn't until she encountered Veronica and her cronies and they really like got her in their crosshairs that Sierra's self I don't know, self-view really started to show cracks. Because like even in the beginning, the first scene is her getting out of the shower, looking in the mirror and saying, "You are a magnificent beast." But
Yeah.
she says it like with a smile, kind of like an approval kind of thing. And then when she meets Veronica, who for whatever reason, maybe it's because Sierra stood up to her in the bathroom, I don't know. But for whatever reason, just decides, I'm going to purposefully go after her
hmm
and hurt her.
Yeah. Um, I think so too, because there's the same theme going on of
Oh,
Sierra.
wait, I didn't ask my question. Sorry. So my
Oh,
question was, do you think that she really was comfortable in herself in the beginning? Or do you think that that was almost like a false, like she was comfortable with a version of herself? That even that first version was a version.
I think it's hard to say. I think where she was in the beginning of the movie, yes. And then life changes happened. And she had to navigate new waters. And that life changes is a boy. Super common for teenagers, people. Like we all go through those things that we're comfortable in a certain spot, and then we get pushed into a new spot, and we have to, like, I don't know how we feel about this metaphor, but it's like a crab having to molt its skin. And
Do
it's
crabs
really
do
hard.
that? I thought they changed shells.
Well, it's a hermit crab.
Oh.
Um, well, remember Mr.
Snakes get rid of their skin.
They do. But like that old skin, that old shell, like I mean, I might be thinking SpongeBob here, but Mr. Krabs.
It's accurate. There was a marine biologist that created that show.
Well, then there you go. We'll stick with it. We learned so much about how sponges live in, there is actually something called a sea pineapple. But anyway.
It was a sea cucumber, but okay.
I just learned this. Maybe that's Animal Crossings. Wow, my brain. Anyway. What was this? Oh, but like we have a hardened shell and we're comfortable there, and then we molt and we're put into a new place. And if we think back, when an animal molts and sheds its skin, it's vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we go into a new situation, like Sierra having this text from this boy who was showing interest in her, new territory, new waters. Now she's in a new situation. She's molted that shell before, and now she's vulnerable to new things. So I think, to answer your question, in the beginning of the movie, yes, I think that she was.
That's what it is. It's vulnerability. That's what happened. That was the uncharted waters that she encountered, because she was so comfortable at the beginning because she didn't have to be vulnerable with anybody.
Yeah, not in that way.
Not in that way. Yeah. Although really, I mean, it looks like her mom and dad love her very much. She had a good relationship with them. She had a good relationship with her best friend, Dan. I mean, but those are different types of relationships than a romantic one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think this movie sheds so much light on systems theory. And
so start for me here, because I don't want to assume people know what we're talking about.
Sure.
Give me what is that?
I'm going to define it in ways that probably aren't textbook. Systems theory is that we all live in systems, family systems, or even our friend systems. It's just a bunch of people working together. And in those systems, we have interactional cycles. And that's kind of where we find our, quote, place. And we sometimes get stuck in cycles that are not great for us. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of like marriage and family therapy is learning how to break that cycle. I think of like every school, I think, across the world has that poster on the wall of all this fish swimming in one direction, and one fish is swimming against the tide, mm-hmm. or against all the other fish, and it's like it just takes one. And so it's kind of that concept of what we're doing. It's recognizing this cycle in this system and trying to make tweaks to it, to cut down on suffering, to create new cycles that we prefer. And so family systems and systems theory kind of helps explain where we came from, why we are who we are in a lot of ways too. And just really helps everybody makes sense in the context of their system. I think, mm-hmm. was it Terry Murphy that says that? And that's so true. And so I don't know if I defined it because...
Well, yeah, you did. I mean, so basically, the systems are relationships. So... Yeah. One system could be your family of origin. Another could be your friend group. Another could be the team that you work with at your job. And each system is governed by a set of unstated rules, and each of us has a role in the system. I think what's interesting, though, I didn't hear you mention it, is when change starts to happen, the system resists the change. It's called homeostasis. It's the process of trying to get things back to the status quo, the way they were. Yeah. And so in this movie, Sierra begins to change. Mm-hmm. And it's not just, this is a really, really great example of systems. You're absolutely right. Even though she's the one enacting change, it's not just her that changes. Her changes kind of spiderweb out and affect other people.
Everybody in the movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was Dr. Kennedy that one time in our class said every change changes everything, which is something that stuck with me because there's so much pressure on making change that we think that we have to make massive changes. We have to leap over a building in order to prove a point, but that's not really true. The smallest changes make changes, mm-hmm. Which I think this movie really shows. It's a tiny things that build into bigger ones. And yes, we do have the climax of the movie where things don't go perfectly, because that's life. And then we learn how to readjust.
Well, I think about the serenity prayer, grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. It's this constant push and pull between taking action to change something while also knowing when can I affect change.
Yeah.
So specifically the change that we're kind of talking about with this movie is Sierra is a high school student.
Mm-hmm.
She is in, I don't know, science class, biology, whatever it is. Who cares? It's one of the ones I failed in high school. So, but after the class, the popular girl at the school, Veronica, Sierra goes to the restroom and Veronica is mean to her. I don't even know if I could call that mean. That's more than mean. She was like cruel. Yeah. And Sierra, I guess you could say she stands up to her. She's not even rude to her. She just kind of corrects her because she says something like, to get her away from the mirror, she says like something like, move it, Frodo, or something like that. And Sierra says like, I think you're thinking of Quasimodo. Frodo's from Lord of the Rings. Quasimodo is this, that, and the other. And Veronica just gets this like super villain, finger pyramid-y evil look on her face. And then is at a diner later, and a guy comes up and approaches her, and instead of giving him her phone number, she gives him Sierra's.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the catalyst for this whole like relationship, hijinky kind of scenario in the movie. There was parts that, so A, loved the movie. B, loved the song. We'll get there. We'll get to the song. C, Sierra wasn't like a totally clean movie hero to me. No. Like she made some decisions and some things in this movie that I thought, I kind of want to boo you.
Yeah. A couple of decisions that I thought problematic, Mm-hmm. And I think having a messy hero in a movie just makes it that, I will say, real. Do I think that a lot of it was realistic? No. But I think that it makes her character more relatable.
So I think that like something that I would be interested to hear your thoughts on is we can very clearly, as viewers of this movie, naturally align with Sierra. Her name in the title probably helps, right? And especially when we see Veronica enact these cruel things on her. And yet later on in the movie, in a moment where Sierra feels hurt, Sierra takes this thing that Veronica had shared to her. They, of course, like every good teen movie, become friends throughout the movie, which I think genuine friends. I think they genuinely both enjoyed each other's company.
Oh, yeah.
But Sierra, in her moment of hurt, takes this thing that Veronica had shared with her as very personal, that a boy had broken up with her. And not only she breaks into her Instagram account, posts on her Instagram account, and then did she tell that boy to put it up on the scoreboard, or did he do it himself?
He just did it himself because it's like one of those things. She was so popular on the totem pole in high school that people wanted to knock her down. And of course, she hadn't been treating the school people very nicely. So I think
she was a little Regina George-ish.
Yes. And I think what you said there too shines some light on why people do what they do. So I think of like Sierra, she gets hurt. So she does this messy thing where she reveals one of Veronica's secrets that was told to her in confidence and humiliates her. And that came from a place of hurt. Once we get to Veronica's house and we meet her family, there's a world of hurt going on right there. So it really helps explain why Veronica's a bully and why she wants so badly for the people around her to hurt. So back to that bathroom scene where Sierra doesn't budge and really corrects her on the insult, and it's just like, yeah, I know what you meant. Veronica's hurting inside, and she's like, why is this not transferring? Why can I not let you hold this hurt that I'm feeling. And we kind of get to see that arc. I think Veronica has one of the best character arcs in a show that I've seen in a long time, because she doesn't totally change in an unrealistic way, but you get to know her, which makes me think of another Brene Brown quote. It's very difficult to hate somebody up close.
Yeah.
And we get up close with Veronica, and we get to know her. We get to see her quirks, what makes her tick, what makes her explode. And then I think towards the end of the movie, you're really kind of loving them both.
Yeah, she's coming from a family where her mom is very obsessed with image.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't really know why until close to the end of the movie.
Yeah.
We get little glimpses, like, you know, they're over at her house and her mom comes in with her two, I assume, little sisters, and they're like kind of dolled up for like a tap or a dance recital or something like that. But she's talking about their outfits. No, you got to look this way. Oh my gosh, are those tassels tangled? Oh my gosh, da 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 da. And she even gets on to Veronica for skipping, I guess, cheer practice.
Yeah.
And then says something like this I mean, it makes sense in the end, but this at the time felt so out of left field to me. Like, she says something like, you know what happens when girls skip cheer practice? They bust out of their uniforms, or something, like implying that she was going to get fat because she skipped practice.
The other thing she said there too was that she had to study. And mom said, oh yeah, that's really going to win the boys.
Yeah.
Insinuating that smart girls don't get the boys. So you have to look a certain way. You have to put on a show a certain way in order to get a guy's attention.
Yeah. And of course we find out almost at the complete end of the movie, the mom had been saying the whole time that her dad died. What did she say? The first time in a plane crash. Then she like changed the story at one point, and Sierra picked up on it. But we find out later on that the dad left the family for
a much younger girl.
Yeah, like a woman in her 20s or something. And so the mom, who's played by Chrissy Metz from This Is Us, is like I guess very self-conscious of that. Like, she became very image conscious, like, oh, well, if he left me for that type of person, then clearly that type of person is preferable.
Yeah. And so I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that my daughters don't fall in that same trap.
Do you think there's some projection there? Like, was she living through the daughters?
Yeah. And she also was getting this idea of you can't trust anybody at the same time, which is a total mixed message to send.
Double bind.
Yeah. Because I think, obviously, a husband up and leaving his family is traumatic for the family. So mom is trying to wrestle with all these feelings. So she both, okay, well, that's how I have to be. That's how I have to look. I'll make sure my kids do it. And at the same time, no, you can't trust anybody. Why are you doing that? Mm-hmm. Which is a total trauma response of the brain trying its hardest to make sense of what happened. And there's no sense to be made.
It's almost like trying to make sense of it while at the same time avoiding it.
Yeah.
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 So it's trying to take action and avoid at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Which is super common in people who've experienced traumatic events. We call it the push-pull. Mm-hmm. You know, please come closer to me. Why are you so close to me? Mm-hmm. Which can be really confusing for partners or for families, or even the person, experiencing that, because there's all these needs are trying to get met at the same time. And somebody who's been through trauma, maybe they haven't been taught how to get these needs met. So they want the closeness of somebody. And so they'll ask you to come closer, but then also their trauma is, you're going to leave, you're going to hurt me. And so then that part of the brain flares up and it's like, get away from me. And so the person wants both at the same time, and it gets very confusing. And I think that's in a lot of ways what mom is displaying is act a certain way because you'll get all the guys, but don't trust them. Mm-hmm.
Which I can see both sides of that being like self-protective, because the image part is self-protective in a way of like, this is love. Love is adoration. Love is people looking at you and wanting to be you or be with you. But then the other self-protective is like being vulnerable and being intimate and sharing your life with somebody can potentially hurt so bad.
Yeah. And now we're back on vulnerability.
Yeah.
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 Absolutely.
So this like collision of Sierra and Veronica that happens. Like Veronica gives, I think his name is Jamie Sierra's number.
Mhm.
And then he starts texting her thinking she's Veronica. Sierra notices this and makes her own fingertip pyramid and says, I'm going to recruit Veronica. And so says, I'll give you tutoring if you'll be my avatar.
Yeah. Yeah. Essentially.
Yeah. But like, because they come from such different worlds, the relationship that develops between the two of them, I think, is the catalyst for growth in both people.
Mhm.
I saw this video online a while ago. I've said it on the show a couple of times, probably more than a couple, that one of my favorite things is on YouTube. I follow all of these channels where people make video essays on film. And one of them is called Lessons from the Screenplay. And this guy did this video essay on the entire MCU.
Oh, wow.
But it was only like a 10 or 12-minute thing. But basically, he was looking at thesis and antithesis, and he was looking at them and integration, and he was looking at them in regards to Captain America and Tony Stark's stories. And he says, like, thesis is what you would say the slogan or the main idea of any character. It's what they're all about. So for Captain America, it's self-sacrifice. Like, he will give of himself till there's nothing left to give, period.
Mhm.
With Tony Stark, it is oh shoot, what did you say? I guess it's like total self it's the opposite of that. What is it? Shoot. Selfishness, I guess maybe. I'm number one.
Mm.
Uh and so that's both of their thesis statements. And then you encounter the antithesis in your story. You encounter the opposite of your thesis. And that collision is the crucible, it's the catalyst for change.
Yeah.
And you see in, I think, Civil War, well, it starts Iron Man in the Avengers where he, takes the torpedo into the thing and he learns self-sacrifice. Cap, you see it in Winter Soldier for the first time, but you see him start to make choices for himself instead of sacrificing. But then this guy shows you how in the end, in Endgame, both characters end up in the opposite place. They end up with integration because Tony has self-sacrificed in putting on the gauntlet and snapping, and
Mhm.
Cap chose to stay in the past with Peggy and claim something for himself instead of self-sacrificing. And so then they exist as integrated people. They still are the same people, but they've taken in the thing that was their opposite, but is now a part of them. And I think that same thing has happened with Veronica and Sierra.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. That was very well done on that
I'll,
YouTuber.
I'll send you the video. I'll send you the video when we get done. You got to watch it. It's so great. But Veronica was a person who was very like image centered, and very concerned with, I guess, superficial things. I don't think she really cared about school or anything on her insides.
I think she wanted fans and adoration, and that was what success looked like to her.
Yeah, very much like a stiff arm.
Yeah.
You stay at a distance, but also love me.
Yeah.
Love me, say that you love me. And then Sierra was somebody who, I don't know. See, this is what I wrestle with Sierra's character. I want to say that she was somebody that didn't care about her outsides, but
Yeah.
was very like introspective and cared a lot about her insides. But at the beginning, she seemed like a person who was very content with her life. And it wasn't really until Veronica did the whole, I'm going to give Jamie her phone number, that it was almost like somebody told her, oh, you're not, a typical looking high schooler.
Yeah, and putting that together with what you just said about the MCU, the MCU. I don't watch a lot of things. I mean, I've seen Endgame, so I'm like the Tony Starks. Um, but it's true because they kind of have opposite qualities that when the hijinks begin, they kind of have to swap in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
Veronica is suddenly interested in bettering herself, how she can be smarter. Now, granted, the motivator is
A boy. Yeah.
and well, motivator for both sides is a boy. So now she has to learn how to learn and grow that way. And Sierra is like, oh, well, I don't know that I have the looks for this guy, so we'll use your looks and my brains, and together we'll create a superhuman. And it's
Captain Planet.
they what's a I almost went Pokemon with that one. Huge fan. Need to stop. Well, never. Like DNA splicing to create these two perfect versions of people.
I'm still playing Pokemon Go. I'd never quit.
I mean, this is how far I've got freaking cards here at my desk.
Nice.
I love it. It's innocent. It's friendship. That on another time. We'll talk about the Pokemon, the first movie, next time.
Boom. I watched Detective Pikachu like a week or two ago.
Oh yes, I cry every time.
I just sent you that. I just texted you that video. Just like,
nice. But you're right in a lot of ways where they each have they're standing for something. Veronica's standing for looks, appearance, keeping up, making sure everybody thinks that you're great. And Sierra's like, I don't care. I mean, internally, I'm great. I'm really focused on my future. Because her mom, the context of that is her mom is kind of like a motivational speaker for young women.
Is that what she is? I was wondering because her mom would like parrot out these acronyms, but I was like, is she a therapist? What is she?
I think she was almost like a life coach, and it was all about self-esteem and being your best self and leaving your self-esteem problems in the past using an acronym. And it's all great on paper. Self-help books are great. They just don't really self-help. Well, what did Brene Brown say about that? It's the to-do kind of things, like follow this list and you will have a better life. And she's like, if they worked, wouldn't we all be having the best lives possible?
Yeah, if they work, why are they still making the books?
Exactly. And I think they mean well. And basically what I think an author has done there is, here's what works for me, let me share it with you. And I think we get so excited thinking, oh, this will change my life. And that just may not be our path. And it was very clear that Sierra's path was not her mother's path in that sense. I think maybe to like revisit what you said in the beginning, maybe there was a front put up. And in a lot of ways it was to keep up with her mom. Because mom was the self-help guru on self-esteem. And so you kind of have to navigate your system. And that's what she was doing. And then it kind of came full force out that maybe she hasn't been as honest with how she feels about herself because it would upset mom.
Huh. What's interesting systematically, though, is that her dad seems, I don't know, I was going to say seems so supportive. There was her dad and her have like a little thing they do where her dad will throw out this quote and then she'll name who the quote was from. And it's always from some literary author. And then it wasn't until the end where like her dad did it at a certain time. I don't remember when, but I just thought, why don't you say something real? Why don't you say something that you've said? And then I thought, oh, maybe her dad's disengaged. Like he's relating in the only way he knows how, but it's not authentically him. Because if I come to you saying, Aaron, I'm really hurting, I need you as my friend, and the first thing you say is a quote from a book or from a, pop song, then maybe that's not, I can't imagine that being what I want to hear at that moment. What I want to hear is probably like, yeah, that does suck. Oh my gosh, come here, let me give you a hug.
Ooh, brain thing. So that kind of makes sense because he was a very famous, successful author. And mom was very successful in
whatever she did.
Self-esteem thing, life coaching, talking to young girls. I think they never really expanded upon it, but she makes it very clear in the very end. It's very hard to live in their shadows, and so she has lived her life in the shadows where you don't have to be seen, and suddenly she has to be seen. And being seen can be one of the most terrifying things a person can ever go through.
I just connected something. The guidance counselor at the school
sucked.
Yes, that's what I thought. The guidance counselor was really what started the change, because Sierra sits down in
Yeah.
her office at the beginning, and everything about Sierra in the real world would be the dream person to send off to college. She's got like straight A's. She got a near perfect score on the SAT. She wants to go to Stanford. And the guidance counselor is like not impressed and was like, what's your thing? How are you going to sell yourself? And that's when she starts trying on different hats. But I think that's really what made her start to question, am I really me?
Am I enough?
Well, yeah. Am I really me, or am I this person that I believe my parents want me to be, or that I have to be because I am the daughter of my parents?
And I think there's this idea too, because she like sits down and the guidance counselor says, what languages do you speak? And she lists like 4.
Yeah.
And she goes, oh,
Including
okay,
Mandarin.
Mandarin, right. And she's like, do you know how many people speak Mandarin? Like a billion over there in Asia. Or I'm like, wouldn't that be a great thing? But also, Sierra says it so proudly, and the guidance counselor is like, that's not exciting. So there's this idea, there's this catalyst of everything I thought was great about me is suddenly not good enough. And in the beginning, she is, a powerful, whatever she says in the mirror, like
Magnificent beast.
magnificent beast. And she goes from magnificent beast to having the magnificent stripped away from her slowly throughout the movie via the counselor telling her, well, that's not enough, via Veronica calling her names and telling her that she's ugly and hurts her eyes. And all of a sudden, we're just kind of left with this beast type character. And that's kind of the inner workings of what starts to motivate. And I think we start to work from that place of hurt. So those two things that work together in the beginning are suddenly separated. And she loses that piece of magnificence, or forgets that piece. She didn't lose it. Forgets that piece because it's kind of been beaten out of her throughout the first half of the movie. Parents
either that, or like maybe that was a real thing. Like maybe it was just she encountered a real part of the world that she hadn't encountered before. Because it could be said that she thought the world was her mom and dad. Not like the world was a small and it was just them, but like everybody would be like her mom and dad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe both.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where high school is such a microcosm of the big world, of the real world.
I hated it.
High school had a lot of ups and downs. Sometimes I miss it. I had a really safe group with the marching band. I had a family at school.
You were in marching band?
I was clarinet.
I was trumpet.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Wait, were you the marching band too?
Yeah.
Well, now during the world's hottest summers, I don't really feel like I should be there, but I really miss it. There was a family aspect in that.
Band camp was tough, but you were all in it together.
Yeah.
Everybody took bets on when the bass drum players would pass out. That's like everybody participated in that.
Who was it for us? It almost sounds like our bands were flipped because we were waiting on the woodwinds to pass out because we were over it like by the first hour.
Oh, well, you guys just had the little tiny thing to hold. See, we were betting on the people that had the bass drums and the sousaphones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did have plenty of sousaphone players go over during. I mean, one of the guys, the instrument was bigger than he was, so it would occasionally a good wind would knock him down. Bless his heart. He, you know what? The absolute resilience of that kid playing an instrument that was bigger than him. He had knocked over and standing back up and he would keep going. He played it all 4 years too.
Wow.
But high school is such a microcosm of what the real world looks like. And going back to like shedding your skin and going into a new world of vulnerability. And she was hit with really mean ways of dealing with that, which are unfortunately wouldn't surprise me if they were real. Not that any guidance counselor ever talked to me like that, but I have heard through people's stories that some people are talked to like that by people who are supposed to be protecting them. And then you do have, I don't even know if she really molted or if her shell was just taken away from her, It's like being thrown in to the deep end without knowing that you can walk to the shallow end when you need to.
Yeah, that's a good metaphor. I got to the end of the movie and I loved it. Leanne pointed out something that she said she thought was problematic.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really like the, I guess, like punch of the movie is Sierra thinking to herself, coming to terms with, I don't look like everybody else, but I'm enough.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, was it Veronica said, you know, only losers hang out with losers, words that came back to haunt her.
Yeah.
But then Leanne was like, see, the problem with that message in this movie, though, was that she really didn't look like everybody else. Like, nobody else in the movie looked like a normal person but her. Everybody else looked like Veronica or looked like Jamie,
Yeah.
except for Dan. But like, other than Sierra and Dan, it was like they forgot to cast normal looking people to populate the school.
In a lot of ways, though, I wonder whether or not it was intentional. Maybe we could make an argument that it was. That's how Sierra felt.
Oh my gosh, you're a genius.
It happens every now and then I lose the genius.
I think that works, though. It's and you know what would be really, really interesting is if they had done a thing where maybe before she has that realization that people did look like her, and then afterwards they didn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would have taken a ton of foresight on their part, but I think that would have made the movie perfect to almost have like this rapid realization and to come to, because with a lot of self-esteem, self-image issues, there is this level of lie that our brains tell us, like, you look so much different than everybody around you. And then when we're able to sometimes get moments of clarity, we realize we're standing in a room of people who are very similar to us, but we put them on a pedestal and we put us below it. And I think that that's kind of what happens in the movie. She realizes, like, she is trying to figure out where everybody stands, and then that she's not so alone in that. I agree with what Leanne said. There were some messages that maybe were a little skewed, and that's why I think it's important to talk about. It is a high school movie. It's geared towards teenagers, which I love working with teenagers, and there's a lot of messages that they tell me that I'm like, ooh, that's a problem. Or, you know, I can remember feeling the same exact way. How did I navigate those waters? And it's hard. And things like, so the problems that stood out to me that were just was when she secretly kissed Jamie in the parking lot thinking, and he thought it was Veronica. I was like, maybe not. That's not great.
Little non-consensual.
Little non-consent. Like, it was supposed to be a super cute romantic moment, and I was like, cringe. Ooh. Like, you know, I'm glad, Sierra, you're happy, but let's talk about, that's not great. And then
Leanne said in that moment, what if he puts his hands on her hips?
It was almost like, didn't one have her hand, her hand over his eyes so he couldn't? They were almost like holding him down.
Yeah.
And, like, there's a lot of strange happening right here. Maybe not the best. Like, we really don't need to be blindfolding people and tricking them into kissing the wrong people. That message, not a fan of. Consent matters, and obviously in this country we have issues. Well, this world, we have issues with consent. So that little, it was a misstep on their part. I understand where they're coming from, but I also was like,
yeah.
Maybe not, sound effects included. And then, of course, at the very end, where there's this idea of, well, I've made all these massive, these really bad mistakes. I've lied to people. I've kissed people with other consent, that they're going to forgive me and take me to the dance in a matter of like a week, I think is kind of what happened. And whereas, yay, happy ending, something about that final scene didn't.
I thought that he got over it a little too easy, I thought. Like, she full on catfished him, and at one point at the game kind of caused him to get maybe a concussion.
Yes.
And then in the end, all it took was him looking through the text thread they had shared and Veronica playing the Sunflower song with him. We need to talk about the Sunflower song. And then all of a sudden he shows up with a Jeep and is like, you're everything I've ever dreamed of. Let's go to homecoming.
He does mention, you know, what you did sucked. And that's true. And I think that's where it comes to, like, where I started with, you know, this idea of changing yourself for somebody, and that is a bad place to be in. And you know, maybe I've been speaking a lot from the place of Brene Brown lately. I think that she is an absolute genius. But it's the belonging versus fitting in. And
Yeah.
I think in the beginning, Sierra was doing a pretty good job belonging. She had her crew, she was herself, and then all of a sudden she was in a
Trying
place
to
where
fit
she
in.
could fit in. Yeah. And so she literally became somebody else. She became Veronica. And it was all very metaphorical for those things. It just kind of got me in the end where I don't know the message was clear of just be
Mhm.
yourself. It was almost like, you know, catfish the hot guy and then write him a really pretty song and then he'll love you anyway.
Yeah.
Ideal, maybe, not really. Um,
Well, I think ideally it would be you wouldn't have to go through all that work because he would just care about you anyway.
yeah, and maybe we could have had a really great movie where she catfished him, but there was just a lot of things towards the end where you could see it spiraled out of control, and that was important to the drama of the movie. As far as the message from the movie, I just hope that people get this idea of Sierra won him because she is Sierra. Now, did she have a lot of missteps? And that's kind of what we're talking about. She's kind of like a hero with flaws for a movie, and made her super relatable because it's not like she was taking the high road all the time, which in movies we're like, you're not going to do that every time. Um, but I do think the most interesting character change was Veronica's, because she never slipped back into Mean Girl.
Yeah.
She stayed supportive even after um, Sierra embarrassed her at the football game, which is,
It might be because her cronies abandoned her, though.
they were with her in the very end at the dance. That's where she was standing outside.
But they
But
weren't in. But they weren't in science class, though.
no, they weren't. There was a lot of fair weather relationships going on,
It's
which
high
is
school.
very high school.
Yeah.
And I say that because if there are any high schoolers listening, high school is tough. I think sometimes we get to a place where we grow and we get away from high school for so long we forget how hard high school was. And so I know that like a lot of my teens come to me and they're like, my parents just don't get it. I'm like, there's a good chance you're totally right. They're
Yeah.
so far removed that we've forgotten. And I don't want to forget because I think that high school is so pivotal in a lot of ways. And I also don't want to become one of those people that's like, oh, back in my day. And I'm like,
Well,
no.
I think it's one of those like it's tough. It's not impossible, but it's tough for people to not have their own perspective. And I remember as an example at some point in high school being in a shouting match with my mom, and I was talking about some problem that I was having in high school, and my mom saying, well, you know, that's not a problem. You know, I'm trying to pay for this house and pay these bills and all that. And I remember like shouting back, well, that's your problems from your world, but this is my world. And like, this is what I deal with every day. And it is a big deal to me.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of feeling not understood, you
No.
know? And I think that that's something to always keep a lookout for. Like, you know, I'm pretty sure that like, shoot, my high school graduating class has already had its 20th reunion. I haven't gone to any of them because I didn't like any of those guys. But like, you know, I've been out of high school a long time, but I don't think it's a foreign experience to know that a person deals with problems in the world they're in, and my problems may not look like theirs, but there's common threads.
Mm-hmm. And I think you're totally spot on. And what you said to your mom is so spot on too, is we get into this idea of, well, my problems are bigger than yours. And I think sometimes parents forget that their kids are in a world that is separate.
Their world is bigger than their kids' world. So that's
Yeah.
why the problems are bigger.
And that's the microcosm of it all, because in high school, we think that's the world. And because it is. That is our world when we're in high school. And then we graduate and the world becomes very big. And we're like, okay, now I have to figure this one out. And then we spend the rest of our lives trying to figure it out. And that's okay. But I think a lot of times they come to me and we're talking about high school drama, and I have to sometimes check myself. I'm like, this is a problem? And I'm like, yes, because that's your world and that's what you're living in. And for anybody to say, oh, that's not a real problem, just wait. I'm like, it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? Invalidating.
Yeah.
And I
It's minimizing.
very minimizing. And I think I was there with certain issues throughout the years, and I hear it coming from my teens now. And that minimization kind of creates that quietness where kids stop talking and then we stop expressing what's happening.
Which makes perfect sense, because why, if they come to you choosing to be vulnerable
Yeah.
and then you invalidate their feelings, why would they bring them back to you?
And take a look at Sierra, like what you said, dad always responds with a book quote. So she comes to him with an issue and he responds with a quote. That's his way of relating. It's just not what she needed. And mom kind of shoots it
Rattles
down.
off
Oh,
acronyms. Yeah.
here's an acronym. What you're saying, just shoot it down. Nope. Just shoot it down. And after I think a couple of those moments in the movie, we stopped seeing the parents because she stops going to them.
That was another part that I didn't like about it, was when she comes in the band uniform after the game and says the line of, do you know how hard it is to be a teenage girl and look like this? And is in, I mean, this actress, Shannon Purser, killed this movie. So, I mean, she is incredible in this movie. When she comes in that scene and is crying and gets those words out and runs upstairs to her room and flops on the bed, I am waiting for mom and dad to open that door and come in and comfort her, and they don't. Mom and dad don't show up. And I thought, what are you doing? Why are you still downstairs?
You know, even if they just stuck their head in and say, do you need anything right now? Or send a text because her phone's with her. She's a teenager, communicate through text on their medium, but nothing happened and she's up there by herself. And I think that feeling, and maybe there's a reason for that, she felt so alone in that moment.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately was alone in that moment. Yeah, that got me too, especially because she just spouted out such a vulnerable, hurt piece of herself. And then to go just kind of stare at it as it's like lingering in the room.
Yeah.
We really need to stop letting elephants destroy the room before we address them
Mm-hmm.
and talk about the elephant in the room, because they're not destructive creatures. They're just big.
Which that reminds me of something I've said to my clients before. I have several clients who, as we go far into the work, will say, I just don't understand why I'm having to learn this now. Why don't I know this? Like they're shaming themselves, like, a real insert whatever role you want to say, a real man, a real adult, a real woman, or whatever should know this. And we've done genograms and we know what the family of origin that they come from is like. And I'll say, well, how can you expect to know this if nobody ever taught you?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, her struggle with true intimacy in the movie could be reflected right there in how her parents respond to her when she's having a crisis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's good to say that while we're focusing on like teenagers right now and like not being taught, in that insert, whoever, a lot of times parents come to me like, as a parent, shouldn't I know this? And I'm like, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
You only know what you know. And the fact that you're learning it and figuring it out means that you figured it out. And there's never too late. There's never too little. I think doing the work matters. Because I've heard that before, why am I just not figuring this out? I was a teenager at one time. And I'm like, well, everybody goes through things differently too.
Mm-hmm.
But it's true. I think her parents were very cerebral in a lot of ways, very logic focused.
Head people.
They're very head people. And she was an outcast even in her own house because she felt true, like experienced her emotions differently.
Talk about systems.
Yes.
Like her parents had kind of structured, this is how we relate. And then she was trying to bring something different.
And it threw things out of whack.
Yeah.
Hence the homeostasis.
Boom.
Boom.
Is there anything else in the movie you want to touch on before we move on?
No, we can't move away from that song and the giant metaphor that sits in that song.
Song, Sunflower, not Post Malone's Sunflower from Spider-Man.
No, but do you know how many times, even watching the movie for the second time, I kept hearing Post Malone in my head as they would talk about sunflowers, or the imagery started popping into the movie, and I was like, all right, Post Malone, this is not your song.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great song. Just, it kept popping into my head.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Andy Gregorick, who I think you've had on the show twice.
Oh, yeah.
She is now doing a self-care class involving plants. And
I saw that. Yeah.
Incredible. And I'm going to butcher her quote. Andy, forgive me. But she says, when we have flowers, they wilt. They get trampled on. They get diseases. We don't look at them and say, oh, they're crap. We tend to them. We make their soil conditions better. We just do everything that we can, and they're still worthy. If a plant grows a little weird, then we're like, oh, look at my quirky plant. But why don't we do that for ourselves?
Holy cow.
I know. I told her I want to have that framed on my wall. And I think that's, in a lot of ways, I love the visual of a sunflower. They're very strong, sturdy flowers. But they're not the kind of flowers that you give somebody who you're romantically interested in. It's always roses.
Mm-hmm.
And
Can I hit you with the lyrics?
Yeah, go for it.
Rose girls in glass vases, perfect bodies, perfect faces. They all belong in magazines. Those girls the boys are chasing, winning all the games they're playing. They're always in a different league, stretching toward the sky like I don't care, wishing you could see me standing there. But I'm a sunflower, a little funny. If I were a rose, maybe you'd want me. If I could, I'd change overnight. I'd turn into something you'd like. But I'm a sunflower, a little funny. And then if I were a rose, maybe you'd pick me. But I know you don't have a clue. This sunflower's waiting for you, waiting for you. And then it repeats the same line again.
Mm-hmm.
Sheesh. And it's actually Sierra singing it, like in the background while they're playing.
Yeah. It's interesting how we as people put certain value into the most random things. And what she says is so true. So she's comparing herself to a rose, which has been given the status of being the romance flower. And sunflowers
they're fun. They're,
funny.
Casual. Yeah.
They grow in fields, but they're so strong. They're so
big. Yeah.
Big. And they have to create certain stalk sizes because their flower is so big that they'll bend, but they grow anyway. And so they grow in different shapes and directions. I love sunflowers because then they also feed back. Like their giant flowers give you the sunflower seeds, and then birds can eat them, and they create. It's a great metaphor. Before I go into like strange metaphorical place in my brain, where birds are eating sunflowers and sunflowers are happy about it. But it is so true. I think I've read that sunflowers face the sun, but then when the sun isn't there, they actually face each other to get the energy from each other to continue growing.
If that's not true, it should be.
And I think that that's kind of what she had to do in the movie.
Huh. When
she lost hope, I think, or when things kind of came crashing down, she had to rely on herself and her friends and figuring it out. And that's kind of what sunflowers do when their source of energy isn't there. Maybe a lot of plants do that, but I remember reading that, and I don't know if it's true, but it's a great metaphor.
Yeah. It should be true if it's not.
And I like to say, too, that a flower may only open its petals to the sun, but a flower is still a flower when the sun's not there.
Yeah.
So we don't lose our worth when somebody's not watching.
Yeah.
We're always us, even if we feel like we're different in situations. And kind of like what we were saying in the beginning about how Sierra's one way at the beginning of the movie where she's not put in a new situation than she is, and that vulnerability comes out and she starts to question her worth. Well, the flower is still a flower when the sun goes down.
Yeah.
It's still holding steady, and it still is what it is. Even though there's not as much light on it and the energy source isn't there, it still is what it is.
Yeah.
It doesn't lose its worth just because somebody's not looking.
Tell me something that your clients have taught you.
It's in the same theme with everything. I had a client come to me one time, and her biggest source of pain was that she feared she was too much for people, and so she started creating a muted version of herself, and I realized I'd do the same thing, and it intrigued me, and we're working. In a lot of ways, we're working on this together as we're like exploring what she's talking about, and I'm so relating right now. I've so been there. Because there have been situations where people are like, Aaron, can you tone it down? You're at a 10, can you go to a 4? And I've heard that so many times in my life because I've always been boisterous. I've always been outgoing and just me I wanted to be. And then there's people along the years that are like, I'm uncomfortable, so can you make yourself uncomfortable so that I can be happy? And you hear that enough times that you're eventually...
That's exactly what they're saying, though.
Yeah. 100%. When somebody says, we take it down a notch, what they're saying is, this is a lot for me, so I'm going to need you to make a change.
Yeah.
And I've kind of always been a people pleaser. So I started presenting a different version of myself that wasn't quite me. And I started noticing it really bad after talking to this client. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm doing that. And so her vulnerability to come in and tell me that raised my awareness of myself. And then I created a whole goal for myself to show up as authentically me as possible.
Yeah.
And without caring, who is uncomfortable. Now, boundaries exist, obviously. There's always...
Right. Yeah.
But I think through hearing her story and then hearing that that's coming from a lot of different directions, we live in a world where we're not allowed to be, quote, too much. We have to bend over backwards to make the people around us comfortable, even if that means breaking our own backs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that by watching people start to come in, as authentically themselves as ever before, it is so inspiring. And in a lot of ways, I want to be just like my clients.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really tough to do this job and be fully present and not be inspired by the people that we get to sit with. I mean, we get to bear witness to them facing the difficulties of their lives full on and with courage making change. And that just in and of itself is so inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's tough to not, as you bear witness, learn from that and take from that and be inspired to do things in your own life.
Yeah.
Tell me something that you do to take care of yourself.
At first, I think this still fits with the theme. One of the things that I love doing, especially after a hard day or now when the world is too real for me sometimes, or just oppressively sad, I like to watch cartoons. They are so non-realistic. They're funny. They're innocent. Even if there's a big deal happening in it, there's resolution.
Yeah. What's your cartoon right now?
Well, I just finished binge watching She-Ra on Netflix.
Is it good? I've thought about it. Yeah. Is it good?
Well, I watched like 5 seasons back to back.
Okay.
Really good, great. I just pulled a Mean Girls moment. I was missing the rule. I fell in love with it. There was representation of all different kinds of walks of life. There were gay characters. There were non-binary characters. There were lesbian couples, and I didn't see any of that coming.
Yeah. Did you watch Steven Universe? Because I heard the same thing about that.
I have not, but I have heard that too.
Yeah.
But like in this movie, there's character changes, and yes, there's stress that comes along with it, but almost every time it's resolved or they learn something new. And so for me, I'm like, please give me resolve. Just let me, because right now we're in a state of
ambiguity. The world is just in ambiguity right now. Yeah.
Stuck in stasis. Nothing's really moving, it feels like. And so that's one of the things I do. What I've also learned, so that's one part, that's like what I do in my house. But another thing that I've really been enjoying is just going for walks around my neighborhood. And it doesn't really matter what time of day, though I do prefer there to be sunlight, but I've enjoyed listening to the sounds of the neighborhood. Sometimes I'll take my music with me, but other times I'll just listen to what's happening around me. Random conversations, sounds of the road. There's a field behind my house, so there's animals that live back there, and there's a walking path through the field, so I'll walk through there and just listen for the different sounds and see if I can figure out what animal that is, or if I can't. A lot of times my brain creates one and I have to run away, but it's still fun. The other day I was like, do geese live in woods? Because something was honking at me from the woods the other day, and I'm not sure what it was, but I decided it was a goose, and I wasn't as threatened. But that's been a lot of fun. I think the world, like the human world, is so chaotic right now, but the world itself maybe isn't. So that's been a fun way for me to
help get you grounded. Yeah.
Yeah.
May I make a cartoon recommendation?
Absolutely.
The new version of DuckTales.
Okay. Oh, I'm down.
The 2017, the one that started then. The voice cast is perfect. It's everybody exactly. David Tennant is Scrooge McDuck. Like, it's perfect. But I teared up at least 4 times watching it. It's on season 3 right now, but both of the first 2 seasons are on Disney Plus.
Okay.
And it is, everybody has a story. There's stories that go from episode 1 all the way through. It's about family and struggle and acceptance. It's so good.
Oh, yeah. If you can cry at a cartoon when you're in your 30s, it's a good cartoon.
Yeah. Yeah. And bonus points if it's not Pixar.
Yeah, but I do love Pixar.
I love it too, but what I'm saying is you walk into Pixar expecting that.
That's true.
Like you prepare your mind and body walking into Pixar knowing that you're going to shed water weight because it's going to make you cry so much.
That is so true. I have on Disney Plus their shorts. I love them. They almost always make me cry. And there's no words in those. So the fact they're pulling all of that through just sound and imagery, I'm like,
yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So let's say that somebody was listening to today's show and they're like, oh man, Aaron, I love him. I think I can connect with him. I want to be his client. How do they get a hold of you?
Well, first of all, I think you're completely correct. Second of all, like you are correct in thinking that you should come work with me. My website is birdseyeviewtherapy.com. Birds BYRD. Yeah. Always, when I was working in the music industry, I always said my debut album was going to be Bird's Eye View because I've always just wanted to use that play on words with my last name. And then when I was like, maybe music industry isn't for me, I was like, I'm still going to use this phrase somewhere. And it's been used before, yes, but I love it so much that I was like, I'm going to call my practice this. My specialties include working with teens, millennials, especially in the LGBTQ community and music industry. I wanted to combine the 2 loves of my life into my specialty. Issues that I work commonly with are trauma, PTSD, anxiety, depression, and self-esteem issues, because they all kind of tend to be wrapped up into something similar. And we kind of uncover that and unwrap that nice gift as we go along. I've been trained in both EMDR and brainspotting, and brainspotting is something definitely worth looking up. I have seen incredible things happen with that.
And these are both ways of resolving trauma.
Trauma, but it doesn't have to be, and a lot of times we don't know what trauma means. People don't realize that what they experienced was traumatic. So it can also be used on feelings of anxiety, depression, unresolved issues that you just take with the past. And so if you're listening thinking, well, I don't have trauma, it's okay, because a lot of the times either we don't or those are our symptoms of trauma.
It could just be maybe you feel stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Brain spotting, I think especially, is a little bit more of an easier to enter intervention. That it's a different way of helping your brain process through stuff. So maybe if you feel stuck, whether or not you can put your finger on what's making you stuck or not, these are tools that can help you engage those things.
And I think that's the beauty of brain spotting, is we don't have to know what's keeping us stuck. A lot of the brain spotting involves trusting the brain to take you where it needs to go. Your brain's brilliant, and it has what I like to think of as a filing system. And sometimes when memories get stuck or unresolved or they're not processed, they kind of get thrown into what I call the junk drawer of filing cabinets, where we had great intention, but now our top drawer over here, we don't really know what's in there. And so opening it means we have to clean it. And that's eventually we're going to have to. So a lot of the times in brain spotting, we get to go through those things and really file them away where we want them to go. And that helps us integrate them better in a new way.
Yeah. It's like defragging a hard drive.
Yeah.
Back when we had to do that.
I don't know if I ever had to, but you're the computer guy, so I just have
you didn't have to do that thing. It was like only on PCs, and every now and then you'd have to go in and it would show you this little like bar, and it would be just kind of like moving files back, and it made your computer run easier. I haven't had a PC in so long, but I remember having to do that in high school.
Yeah, I had a Dell when I graduated high school, and it died within 3 years. So I've been on Mac ever since.
Yeah, they'll do that. Aaron, once again, I can't even begin to say how much I've enjoyed this. Like, you're just one of the best people ever. And you're obviously always welcome on the show. I think more importantly, though, is when this is all over, I just can't wait to see you again.
Gosh, can we please get coffee or lunch?
Yes.
And
yes.
within 6 feet of each other? I don't know. Something that's anti-pandemic when this is over.
Ooh, yes. Yes. My friend, you are amazing. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much. That was a great time.
Thanks so much for joining me this week in the theater. I'll make sure I save a seat for you and a friend next week. Let's raise the lights, lower the curtain, and say that for this week, the theater is closed.